Hi friends. So living out in the country, our internet connection, it turns out, is predictably unreliable and kind of intermittent. So rather than doing our Facebook Live that we were planning to do today, I'm going to attempt to just video our cooking class, and then I will try to upload it as soon as the internet is cooperating. So today we are making a Blue Zone inspired fava bean stew. If you're not familiar with the Blue Zones, these are regions across the world that have been studied that have the highest number of centenarians in their populations. Centenarian is somebody who lives to be 100 or more. And so researchers have looked at these areas around the world where they have these really high concentrations of centenarians and dubbed these areas the Blue Zones. And they've looked to try to understand why people live, they don't just live a long time, they live well. They're not on breathing machines and in nursing homes. They're healthy at 100. And researchers have looked at their lifestyles to try to understand why these populations are so healthy, and they have found certain common factors. Some of them include like doing exercise throughout their lives, staying connected to community, but a key element in all of these cultures is that they all eat a primarily whole foods, plant-based diet. So if they consume any animal products, it's very, very little. They basically eat vegetables and beans and grains and seeds and nuts and fruits. So the stew that we're doing today, the fava bean stew, is inspired by a traditional Sardinian recipe. Sardinia is one of these Blue Zones, if you're not familiar with fava beans. And so I realized, because my mother pointed it out, that everything is backwards because the screen is flipped. So I don't know how hard it is to read, but anyway, fava beans. They're just these big beans. They're really nice because you don't have to, here, let me show you a little bit. You don't have to soak them like you do a lot of other beans. Can you see? So those are fava beans, dried. You can cook them until they're just tender, but still holding together. We are gonna cook them today until they're so soft that they start to like turn into like kind of a mush, which will give our stew some extra texture and just help to thicken it up. Like always, we're doing these quarantine friendly plant-based cooking classes, in part because it's more important than ever that we stay healthy. And again, we know that a plant-based diet is probably the best way or the most effective way for us to avoid the so-called diseases of affluence, diseases like heart disease, diabetes 2, high blood pressure, certain cancers, and a lot of those same diseases are the diseases that cause people to have a more severe reaction to coronavirus. So coronavirus or not, right? These are like the healthiest foods, but especially right now, we all want to be staying as healthy as possible in the short term, but also all these foods, they're helping us to boost our immunity in the short term, but they're also helping us to prevent, and in a lot of cases, reverse disease for the long term. And again, this is a longevity, Blue Zone eating is longevity eating. So we're eating to stay healthy today, but we're also eating to stay healthy for a very long time. Okay, we're gonna get started. And as always, you can replace almost everything that we're cooking today. If you don't have anything, you can also message us and we can kind of guide you on substitutions. But we're gonna start with just heating up a little bit of olive oil. And then we're gonna saute our onions. We almost always start with onions. Let's see, I'm gonna move you here. So we're gonna throw our onions in, and then we have some celery and some carrots chopped, and I'm gonna throw these in, and we're gonna let those saute for on medium heat. Ideally, really you want to let these saute for like 5 or 10 minutes, or until they're a little bit soft and slightly golden brown. And oh, fennel. I also have fennel. So fennel is something that I never cooked with until there was a great National Geographic special magazine on the blue zones, and it had some great recipes in there, including a recipe for fava bean soup that included fennel. And I never really was interested in trying fennel because I know it has this mild black licorice flavor or anise flavor, and that just doesn't appeal to me super much. But I tried it the last time I made this stew, and it was really mild and helped make the stew extra delicious, and it didn't taste like black licorice to me. But so it's just another ingredient that's used in a lot of Sardinian cooking. You know, it's hard to maybe pinpoint exactly specific ingredients that the nutritional benefits come from. It's you know, it's really the diet in total. But one thing that we know too is that the bigger variety of plant-based foods that we can eat, you know, the bigger the variety of nutrients that we're getting. So we want to eat a really diverse range of fruits and vegetables, of plant-based foods. So fennel, if you don't know what fennel looks like, this is fennel. And the whole thing is edible. You can eat every part of it. So it's a lot of it's just sort of like how strong you want the flavor and what you're making. And again, I'm not sure that I'm crazy about the anise flavor, so I don't want to use a ton. So I just cut up, I'm going to use like this. I did about half of this fennel bowl. And I'm going to throw it in with my, I'm going to throw it in with my onions and my celery and my carrots and let that cook for a couple minutes. And I just turned the fan on because while I was prepping for Facebook Live that's not happening, my smoke alarm went off because I was trying to pre-cook the beans and I forgot to turn the fan on. Well, and I just burned the beans. So that was all a big disaster. But anyway, we're going to try not to set up the fire alarm again. So I've got the fan going. Okay, so I'm going to let those saute for, again, I'm going to let them get a little bit golden brown and kind of soft. So we're going to let them go for maybe 5 more minutes. And then we're going to add in our minced garlic and let that cook for another minute or two. And then I'll just tell you a couple of the other ingredients that we're using today. So, and again, a lot of this is sort of looking around the house to see what I had, and making do with what we have. So you can swap out pretty much all of these vegetables. I mean, it's a fava bean stew, but you don't have to even use fava beans. You could use lentils would work really well with this. Really, basically any bean. Red lentils have a similar quality in that when you cook them a long time, they get like real mushy. So the texture, if you use red lentils, you'd have the same texture as using the fava beans, you know, if we cook it for that extra length of time. But you can use any kind of bean. You can really use any kind of vegetable. Anyway, I had potatoes, these little cute potatoes, so I sliced those. We're gonna throw those in. I'm also gonna throw in some chickpeas or garbanzo beans, which are also used a lot in a Sardinian diet. And then we have some diced tomatoes. I'm going to throw in the tomatoes. I also just pre-cooked a little bit of pasta, so I used this cavatelli. You can use, again, almost any kind of short grain. So that's my cavatelli. You could, of course, whole grains are always healthier than a white pasta. You could also use something like Israeli couscous. And then we're gonna add in some parsley and some basil and some black pepper. If you had fresh basil or fresh parsley, that's great. Also, really any fresh herbs. I don't have any fresh herbs. I just have dried herbs, so I'm using what I have. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna throw in, let's see, we're gonna bring you over here, and I'm gonna, so again, I feel like that my heat is a little bit high, and ideally I might have had it at a slightly lower heat, so it would just cook a little slower and turn golden brown without burning at all. And I'm gonna throw in my garlic. And I'm gonna turn my heat down a little bit. I'm also gonna add just a tiny bit more olive oil. And then you just want to be careful that you don't burn the garlic. It'll cook really fast. And so you kind of want to look for the garlic to get a little bit golden brown. But another good way when you're cooking garlic to determine when it's cooked enough is just to smell. Because garlic has like a really nice aroma that releases as it cooks. And once you can smell the garlic, the aroma of the garlic, it's probably done. And again, you want to be careful that you don't overcook garlic, which is really easy to do. Okay, so then I'm gonna go ahead and add in my fava beans, and I'm gonna use about a cup and a half. And actually, I'm gonna go ahead and rinse these. Okay, so my rinsed beans, I'm gonna throw those in. And then we're going to add in our broth. All right, so I'm going to just pretty much want to cover my beans with broth. Okay, so I'm going to start by adding about 6 cups, about a quart and a half of broth. I really just want to cover my beans, but the beans are going to absorb the liquid a lot, so I also want to keep my eye on it. And I'm going to go ahead and turn my heat up and bring this up to a boil. And then so I want to be able to, I want to keep adding liquid though as the beans absorb the liquid, and the stew is going to get thicker and thicker. So just so you can keep it at the consistency you want to keep your eye on it, and then you're probably going to add more broth. I'm using this Better Than Bouillon broth, which is what I always use. You can, of course, always make your own vegetable stock, which is probably the best. But short of making your own, you want to use a really high quality stock because it does affect the flavor so much. And honestly, there are not a lot of great vegetable broths out there. I like the Better Than Bouillon. Rapunzel makes a good one. Those are the only two that I ever really use. I'm sure that there are probably others. So just a good high quality vegetable stock if you're not making your own. And then you can see I just really covered. So I've got the beans covered. And then I'm gonna go ahead and bring this up to a boil. Okay, so I'm bringing my broth up to a boil. And then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to reduce the heat, bring it back down to a simmer. And then I'm going to add in my tomatoes. So I just got a 16-ounce can of diced tomatoes. Of course, if you have fresh tomatoes, great. And then I've got some basil, so I'm gonna add in about a teaspoon of basil and dried parsley. I'm gonna add in about the same, maybe a little bit less. And I'm gonna give it a little stir. And then we are gonna cover this and let it simmer until the beans are tender, until the beans are starting to fall apart. So this is where not doing this on Facebook Live is actually kind of better because it's going to take like maybe 45, 50 minutes for the beans to get as soft as we want them. That's what I was trying to do in advance. I was trying to pre-cook my beans, but then I burnt them and the internet failed. So we're going to let these cook. And then we'll throw in some of our other ingredients that only need to cook for a few minutes. Okay, so while the beans are cooking, we are going to visit with the roosters as promised. So last week we visited with the hens, but at Sweet Peeps Microsanctuary we also have a little bachelor flock and then a couple of individuals. So the boys are enjoying some lunch right now. This is Chaim. So these guys... This is Chaim. So these guys were all rescued from Kaporos. They were all bred, they're all Cornish crosses. They were all bred to be meat birds. They were all bred to be, to grow really fast and be, quote, market weight at 8 weeks old. So they were bred to be slaughtered at 8 weeks old. They were then bought to be used in something called Kaporos. If you don't know about it, you can Google it. You probably won't believe me if I tell you about it. It's just a modern day fanatical religious ritual that uses these chickens and sacrifices these chickens. And some brave, amazing activists go every year and they rescue as many as they can. And this year they rescued 200 and we took 6, and they were all babies when we got them, and they've really grown up so fast. They're all super sweet, but they're busy right now eating lunch. And then this is Bert. We just took Bert in a couple days ago, and Bert is another byproduct of the backyard chicken industry. People breed chickens mostly because they want hens for laying. They don't want roosters. You can't even have roosters in a lot of cities. And so roosters are either killed for meat, or they're often just discarded or dumped. And Bert also, he was I think purchased with a bunch of other chicks at Tractor Supply, and the people who got him probably didn't realize even at the time that he was a Cornish cross. But so he Cornish crosses, again, they're bred to be huge, and so they end up with having tons of life-threatening, like very painful and life-threatening health problems if their diets aren't limited. Hey Puru, you want to come say hello? And so all the kids here, they eat a really strict diet. They get a quarter cup of food morning and night, plus they get greens in the afternoon, low-calorie greens in the afternoon. So Bert just went on the diet that everybody else is on, and we're going to try to get some weight off of him. And he's currently in a separate pen as they all get used to each other, and then we'll introduce them, and hopefully he'll just become part of the flock. This is Noah. Hey Noah, say hi Noah. Oh, and then who's this? Puru, here's Puru again, Purusha. And they're really just the biggest, sweetest babies. Besides being very handsome. Purusha, are you so handsome? Purusha, hello. Okay, now let's go back in and check our beans. Okay, so we're gonna check our beans. And I'm going to add in, so they're still intact, but they're getting soft. And while they're still liquid in the pot, I'm gonna go ahead and get my potatoes in because I want my potatoes to cook. And if the soup gets too thick, it's gonna be hard for the potatoes to cook. It is getting pretty thick right now, so I may add a little bit more broth. And it's gonna get even thicker. As soon as I add in, I'm gonna throw in my chickpeas now. So we've got everything in now except for the noodles, and the noodles will go in really at the last minute. So I've pre-cooked the noodles. I'll show you here. I've got my noodles pre-cooked, and I'm just gonna throw those in after everything else is done. So we're gonna, again, I'm gonna add a little bit more broth, and then we're gonna bring this back up to a boil, and then again reduce it back to a simmer. And so I'm just gonna throw in about another 2 cups of water, and then I'll go ahead and I'll stir in my broth. And then again, I'm gonna bring this back up to a boil. And then once it comes up to a boil, I'm gonna bring it back down to a simmer. We'll let it cook for about another 10 minutes. Okay, so we've now been cooking our beans for really probably an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, so we're about ready to finish up with our stew. I kept cooking because I kept cooking it because I wanted the beans to really fall apart in there. You can see, I don't know if you can see in that there's, so you can see some chickpeas there, but like that was a fava bean, a fully intact fava bean. But most of the fava beans at this point have fallen apart, so that I've got that like nice creamy texture. And you could keep cooking it longer if you want. I really like my fava beans to be almost completely dissolved in here, but it's also I've sort of achieved the purpose of getting that thickness. And then I still have some intact beans, which is also kind of nice. So then the last thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add in, so I have my pre-cooked grain, and I just use that, what is it, cavatelli? Cavatelli? I'm not sure, I forget now what it is. Anyway, you can use any kind of short grain. And then I'm gonna just stir that in, and we can serve this up. And then here we have our finished product, and we have just garnished with a little bit of fennel weed, I guess is what that is. So just like you can make all kinds of substitutions, substituting different beans, substituting different vegetables, you can also add. So adding in any other fresh vegetables that you'd like, or other beans. If you have any questions about substitutions or additions, or what we think might go well or whatever, message us or post in the comments. Sorry about the Facebook Live not working, so we can't have an interactive class, but again, you can post comments or questions in the feed, and going forward, we don't know how long quarantine is going to last, and even when a strict quarantine is lifted, it looks like social distancing is going to be kind of a reality for a long time. And so we will continue to do as many online cooking classes and videos and other classes that we can. If you have any requests let us know. We're also looking to maybe try to have some guest chefs coming up in the next couple of weeks. And if you are looking for other uplifting content during this time, you can also always head over to the Sweet Peeps Microsanctuary page and see videos and stories of some of the rescued chickens that live here at the sanctuary. So thank you for watching. Hoping that everybody is staying healthy and weathering the pandemic well, that you're not experiencing hardships. Of course, everybody is in one way or another, but just hoping that everybody's doing well and taking care of each other and staying connected in all the ways that we can while still staying safe. Wishing you all and all beings everywhere good health and safety and happiness, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.